Days of travel, my dress wrinkled, my collar wilted, my head aching from coal smoke and poor sleep. Even so, I remember thinking, with a kind of stubborn gratitude, that I had arrived. However small the town might be, however dusty and raw, I had at least reached the place where my better life was supposed to begin. Red Creek looked nothing like the neat picture I had carried in my mind. The station was little more than a peeling depot, a warped platform, and a freight cart with one wheel sunk deep in mud, dried hard by the sun. Beyond it lay a broad street of churned dirt, kitchen rails, a few false front buildings, and the endless pale reach of the plains. The wind moved hot and dry through everything. It lifted grit against my hem, rattled a loose sign somewhere down the road, and carried the smell of horses, old grain, and sun-baked lumber. A person could disappear in such a place. That was the first thing I thought when I saw it. Still, I squared my shoulders and went inside the depot office with Mrs. Holloway's letter ready in my glove. I gave my name to the station woman, a narrow-faced creature in a navy dress with sharp cuffs and a sharper manner. The moment I said I had come for a place at the Holloway house, her eyes shifted. It was not much, just a flicker, but I felt it like cold water down my back. She asked me to repeat the name. I did. Then she pressed her lips together and said the position had already been filled. Mrs. Holloway's niece had come from Topeka the week before. Family had been taken instead. There was no need for anyone else. I stood there so still I could hear the clock ticking above her desk. I said there must be some mistake. I had a letter. I had traveled on that letter. They knew I was coming. The woman did not argue, but she did not take it back either. She only said she was sorry in the dry, practiced tone people use when they are sorry, chiefly because they must stand near your disappointment and would rather not. I thanked her because I had been raised to thank people even when they had handed me bad news, and then I walked back out into the light before the tears in my eyes could become visible. On the platform, I set my bags beside a bench and counted my money twice, then once more to punish myself for hoping it might change. $3.62. That was what remained after the ticket, the meals I could not avoid, and the porter in Wichita whom I had tipped because he was old, and because I had still believed, at that point, that decency would be returned to me by the world in some form. With $3.62, a woman could pay for a few nights' lodging, perhaps, if she found a place willing to keep its standards low. After that, she could pray, starve, or be foolish. I sat with my purse in my lap and felt the whole town grow strange around me. People passed. Freight was unloaded. A child cried until his mother hushed him. Two men argued over seed corn. A dog slept in the narrow band of shade beneath the bench, as if life had never once surprised him. I remember being ashamed of how alone I looked. There is a particular humiliation in misfortune when it happens in public. It makes you feel as if everyone can see not merely that you are in trouble, but that you were vain enough to expect otherwise. That was when a man's voice said, "You look like somebody just pulled the floor out from under you." I looked up at once. He was standing a few feet away, hat in hand, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, plainly dressed, with 3 children gathered near him. 2 boys stood close but not touching him, solemn and watchful, all elbows and dust and patched knees. A little girl half hid behind his coat, one hand twisted in the cloth, her face turned up toward me with grave, uncertain eyes. The man himself was not handsome in any polished way, but there was something steady about him, something worn honest by weather and work. He did not smile. He only waited, as if he understood that a frightened person ought to be given room enough to answer with dignity. I told him I was quite all right, which was a useless falsehood. He glanced once at my bags and said, gently enough to spare me, that I did not appear to be all right. So I told him the truth, or enough of it. I told him I had come for employment and found it gone. I did not tell him how afraid I was, nor how quickly fear becomes calculation when a woman is alone and nearly out of money. He listened without interrupting. Then he said his name was Jack. He had a farm 9 miles west, a widowed house, 2 sons, 1 little daughter, an aging father, too much work, and no one dependable left to help with the burden of it. His offer came plain: room, board, wages when he could manage them fairly, and a chance for me to see the place before deciding. No grand promises, no polished speech, only a quiet kind of need. I ought to have mistrusted him. Any sensible woman would have. But the children were there, dusty and real, beside him, and the little girl suddenly asked in a voice so soft I almost missed it, "Can you make biscuits?" I said yes, because I could. She nodded as if the matter were serious and settled. Jack exhaled, not quite a laugh, and I felt, for the first time since the train had stopped, that the day might not be finished with me yet. Jack loaded my carpet bag into the back of the wagon as if he had done such things for stranded women all his life, and had long ago decided there was no use making a ceremony of it. I climbed up beside the children with more caution than grace, gathered my skirt beneath me, and kept my gloves on, though the afternoon was warm. The boards of the wagon bed smelled of dust, seed sacks, and old harness oil. When Jack took the reins and the team started forward, Red Creek slipped behind us at once, the town already seeming smaller than the trouble it had caused me. For the first mile, nobody said much. The wheels rolled through ruts baked hard by sun and wind, and the horses flicked their tails against flies with weary annoyance. The older boy sat opposite me, arms folded, studying me as if he expected I might prove dishonest by supper. The younger one leaned sideways to watch the road behind us, his boots knocking now and then against a tin pail. The little girl sat pressed to my sleeve, not touching, only near, with the careful nearness of a child who wants comfort but is not prepared to ask for it. At last, Jack said, "Ben, this is Miss Annie Whittaker." The older boy gave one stiff nod. "Tom," Jack said to the smaller one, "mind your heel." Tom straightened at once and looked at me with frank curiosity. "Can you really make biscuits?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good ones?" "Usually." That satisfied him more quickly than it ought to have. Ben did not smile. "Pa said we'd just see the place," he said. "He didn't say you were staying." "I haven't said so either," I answered. That earned me the smallest change in his face. Not approval, only attention. Jack drove with both hands on the reins and his eyes mostly ahead. Up close, the lines of strain about his mouth showed deeper than they had on the platform. He was not a man careless with words, I could see that already. Each one seemed weighed before he spent it. After a while, he said, "My daughter is Elsie. She's shy till she isn't." The child glanced up at that, as if she had been unfairly discussed, then lowered her eyes again. "And my father answers to Mr. Cole when he's displeased, and Samuel when he is not," Jack went on. "It may help to know which sort of evening you're walking into." "Does he dislike strangers?" I asked. "He dislikes change," Jack said. We left the main road and turned west along a narrower track between fields just beginning to green. The land opened wider there. Fences ran long and low over the swells of the prairie. A few cottonwoods marked a creek bed in the distance, and beyond them the sky seemed so large it made a body feel unfinished. I had never been so far from a city in all my life. There were no church bells, no close houses, no washing strung yard to yard, only wind moving over grass and the dry rasp of harness leather. Yet, for all its emptiness, the country did not feel dead. It felt watchful, as if it meant to test every person who entered it. Tom began chattering once the town was behind us. He told me they had 2 milk cows, a a lame rooster that still fought anything red, and a black dog named Patch, who slept where he pleased and belonged, in his own view, to nobody. Elsie listened with solemn interest, leaning nearer each time I answered, as though measuring whether my voice could be trusted. Ben remained silent until we crossed a shallow creek, and one wagon wheel dropped hard into a rut. I caught Elsie before she pitched sideways, and when I set her upright again, Ben said very low, "Thank you." It was the first kind thing he had offered me, and it was enough. The farm came into view at sunset. A weathered house set back from the road, a gray barn, a slow windmill, and fields spread under the last copper light. Smoke rose from the chimney. Chickens scratched through the yard. An old man stood by the gate with one hand on a shovel, straight despite his years, waiting as though he had heard us long before we arrived. Jack drew up the team and said under his breath, with no humor at all, "Well, here we are." I took my bag and went in. Mr. Cole stood by the gate in his shirt sleeves, though the evening had cooled. He was lean as a fence rail, iron gray, and sharp about the eyes. When I stepped down from the wagon, carpet bag in hand, he looked me over from my hat to my dusty hem, as if measuring not my manners, but my use. "So," he said at last, "this is the lady your father brought home from the station." None of us smiled yet. Jack answered in the same plain voice he had used in town. "Her name is Annie Whitaker. She came for work and found none waiting." The old man's gaze did not leave my face. "Can you rise before daylight, keep accounts in your head, and mind children without turning sentimental over it?" I ought to have been offended. Instead, I said, "Yes, sir, because hunger teaches a body which pride can be spared." Then, that brought the faintest twitch to Samuel Cole's mouth, though not enough to call a smile. He took my bag before I could protest and led the way inside. The house smelled of coffee gone bitter on the stove, dust shaken from quilts, and the last of some stew kept warm too long. It was clean where it could be clean, worn where tiredness had won, and carrying the shape of a woman who kept order well. A lamp burned on the table, though there was still light enough from the west windows to see the plates already set out. Elsie went at once to a chair near the stove, climbing into it with the ease of custom. Tom ran for the dog. Ben disappeared with a bucket, likely to the pump. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, feeling every mile I had traveled and every eye that had judged whether I belonged. Jack washed at the basin and came back with his hair damp at the temples. He did not sit until his father had taken the head of the table. I saw then how rule lived in that house, not loudly, but deep. Ben returned with water on his boots. Tom smuggled the dog a scrap before anyone had begun. Elsie folded her hands because someone, long ago, had taught her to do it. Jack bowed his head. The room hushed. The prayer was short. The meal was shorter. Nobody wasted words while passing beans, bread, and the cold slices of beef left from Sunday. I tried to eat slowly, as if a lady with choices would eat, but I was hungry enough to shame myself. Samuel noticed. He said nothing, only pushed the bread plate nearer my hand. That small mercy nearly undid me. I had expected suspicion. The table felt closer to rescue. After supper, I rose to clear the dishes because sitting still under gratitude was more than I could bear. Jack moved aside at once, not from politeness, but from the reflex of a man used to making room for labor. I found the plates chipped, the towels worn thin, and the pantry arranged with the desperate neatness of a household forever trying to stay 1 week ahead of want. Elsie watched in silence. She did not ask questions the way Tom would have. She only leaned against the table and studied me with grim concentration, as if deciding whether I matched some private memory. At last, she said, "Mama wore her apron pinned higher." The room seemed to tighten around us. Jack, at the far cupboard, stopped moving altogether. I answered as gently as I could, "Then your mama knew better than I do." Elsie nodded and stayed. Later, when the pans were dried and stacked, Jack carried my valise to the small room off the back hall. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, one peg for a dress, and a window looking west over the yard. Nothing in it was fine. Everything in it was honest. "You may sleep there tonight," he said. "In the morning, if you wish to go, I'll drive you to town myself." I looked at the bed and felt travel in me. I ought to have answered at once. A sensible woman would have thanked him, kept her distance, and bargained for every safe condition. But I was tired beyond sense, and the house around me, for all its reserve, held one thing I trusted at once: need without meanness. No one had promised ease. No one had hidden grief. A bed had been offered. Bread had been shared. "I'll stay," I said, and heard myself.